was just a boy, I would think about the day when I leave this town and set out for the shining lights that never let me down. So I got on a ship with $22 and a searching soul. I'm going to the promised land where streets are paved with gold.
Welcome to Hometown Chronicles USA, the podcast where every small town and city across the nation has a story to tell. Join us as we uncover the rich tapestry of America's historic sites, weaving together the echoes of the past with the vibrancy of present-day happenings. From forgotten landmarks to bustling community events, we dive deep into the people who shaped their hometowns, those who have been pivotal in building their community's legacy, and those carrying it boldly into the future. Each episode celebrates the resilience, culture, and spirit of these local stories, highlighting the unique heartbeat of every corner of the country. Whether it's a historic main street, a thriving local business, or a tradition passed down through generations, Hometown Chronicles USA brings you closer to the places that make America extraordinary, one community at a time.
But when I set foot on that newfound ground, I could feel the truth. I could be a shining star, like the great Bambino played through. Look at me, I'm chasing the American dream. Even if it wasn't quite what I thought it'd be, I am gaining some steam.
What's up, my dear Watson? We are back with episode 2. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. How are you?
Man, I'm feeling much better. I don't have to be out in the fray with
20-degree weather today?
With that, and then the maniacs that are all on the road
Oh,
for
yeah.
Christmas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the traffic's
that's more
been
of my
insanity.
concern. Yeah, I can dress for the weather, but the idiots out driving, that makes it tough.
Yeah, no, I'm just staying inside. You know, I got the nature preserve near my house, so if I need to go out for a hike, I'll just go do that. But I'm not
Yeah.
going anywhere today or tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah, man, I hear you. And, I wish that what's happening outside right now would be kind of like what's the topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is like abandoned places, like ghost towns and stuff like that, right? Get people out of here and have them at home so we can shake and move and do the things that we want to do. But, that's not the case, man.
You're saying you'd rather live in the ghost town sometimes.
That's up for debate. It just kind of depends on how that ghost town came to be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's the main thing. But
If
yeah,
people just left, that's okay. But if it's some massive environmental hazard, then maybe count me out.
Yeah, or just some type of tragedy that left carnage and all of the spooky things as well.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And yes, we do know that Halloween is gone, but I mean, it's our podcast, and this is just something that we thought was going to be cool to talk about. So that's what we're doing today. So, when you and I were talking the other day, well, actually, we were texting last night, and I sent you a couple of places that were like ghost towns or, abandoned places or what have you, because we got to visit some of these places we got to do a video on this now, right? Like,
So we're going to Utah?
If we can get a sponsor.
What is that, like a 2-day drive?
I would drive that too, just because there's so many interesting spots along
and I
the
would
way.
too.
You know what I'm saying? I know there's so many dope spots along the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, Utah has some. Here in North Carolina, you had mentioned a spot here in North Carolina that you went to as a kid that you had to take a ski lift to get to or something like that.
Yeah, ghost town in the sky. I don't know if it counts as a ghost town. It's a ghost town themed. It was a ghost town themed theme park. Yeah.
Okay. That's what's up, man. And I was looking at one that was in this place called Grafton, Utah. Mm-hmm. And it's located south of the Zion National Park. And if you're watching, you see I have a National Parks T-shirt on,
Oh yeah,
and
love it.
and I didn't do that by design. It just so happened to fall into place, right? And so, but no, so like I read that in 1859, these individuals from the Church of Latter-day Saints established this place, and that the settlers were forced to leave due to floods and tensions with the indigenous folks. And this is in 1859, which is not so far away, right?
Right.
And so I was sitting here and I was thinking, like, when I think ghost towns or when I think of indigenous battles or skirmishes with settlers or what have you, I'm not thinking 1859, right? Especially being on this side of the Mississippi because, the Trail of Tears had already happened and things like that. But, I guess in the Wild Wild West, things were still popping.
Yeah.
And there were still these battles and things like that out there in Utah. And so, I don't know, man. Like, I just think it's very interesting because the only thing that's there now is is a graveyard. It said that there's a graveyard that remains, and that's it.
And a church. There's a church there too.
And there's a church? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a
Yeah,
graveyard
yeah,
and a
there's
church.
pretty well preserved church. They said it's like the best, most well preserved church from that period in the entire state. And what's crazy to me was they established there for, I think it said, less than a decade.
So they weren't there long at all.
So they moved in and they hung out for a little while and they're like, it's time to move on now.
Golly. Can you imagine that though, right? It's like you get there, you set up shop, you're thinking this is going to be your forever home, and then perhaps descendants of the original inhabitants come back and they're like, yo, square up.
Yep. Time to get out.
It's time to get out. But I'm curious about how many times or how many places that actually occurred, or they came about to be ghost towns or abandoned or what have you, due to those type of interactions between indigenous folks and colonizers, from a historical perspective that are still around today that we just don't necessarily have the histories to. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. There's got to be just hundreds of towns that just didn't make it, and they've all got different stories. We talked about North Carolina, and I mean, there's a couple examples of that here in North Carolina. If you follow Preservation North Carolina, they're always posting these abandoned buildings and houses, not necessarily towns. But if you remember, there's that one town that came up here in North Carolina that was for sale, and I think it was I want to say 3 acres that included a post office.
Yeah, you said that
a general
to me.
store. Yeah, it was like
Kyle was like, "Let's buy it."
Yeah, and then when I looked it up again last night, it was like they reduced the price on it. I'm like, all right, we're getting
Are they getting to our price range?
I mean, for the cost of a single house here in the Charlotte area, you can buy a whole ghost town.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty tempting. They've got a church up here in Pine Bluff for sale. They want $60,000 for it, and it's an old abandoned church. So I mean, I'm drawn to these abandoned buildings, and when I see them go up for sale, I'm like, that would make a cool studio.
Yeah.
Probably in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
If you're getting it for $60,000, but
yeah. But as fast as things are happening around us as it relates to growth, you probably won't be by yourself for long because things are getting developed pretty quickly around here.
Yep.
What has been your association with the spiritual realm or the ghostly realm? Like as a kid, did you ever do a Ouija board or say Candyman in the mirror or
Candyman?
Bloody Mary?
No, I don't know about that. No, Ouija boards weren't allowed in my house.
Okay.
I didn't really have a lot of experience with the spiritual world. If you're talking about ghosts and things like that, no, that wasn't a part of my childhood or my adulthood for that matter. I'm not a big believer in ghosts personally.
I did the Ouija board one time with my friend Paul Gouge. Yeah, Paul's last name was Gouge, and Quincy Stratford. Quincy's a pastor now in Florida, near Tampa or in Tampa.
Oh, okay.
We grew up together and would always get in trouble in school, just joking all the time. And Paul was a really, really cool guy there as well, growing up there in Clarksville, Tennessee. But I remember us being over Quincy's house, and Paul had this Ouija board, and that thing did some moving, man. I mean, we're kids. It's not like we knew how to conjure up stuff. You know, it did some moving. And I talked to my mom the other day, and my mom is like the most straight-laced Christian woman ever, doesn't believe in any of this stuff. And she came out the other day and said that, we played that thing, and that thing is the devil, and this and that, this and that, this and that. So she had an experience. She didn't go into detail, but she clearly didn't do it again. So I don't know if I necessarily believe. Well, you know what? Let me not say that. So in 2018, I was prepping for my family reunion back at a former plantation where my family was enslaved in Warren County, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I got out the car, and I had been to the site before, but I was bringing my sister and two of my cousins. And so, I'm sorry, this was prior to that. It was just myself and one of my cousins. So we go and we walk up to the home, and it just gets like eerily silent, right? And it was just like I'm seeing everything around me move like normally, and I'm walking, but it just gets super duper silent. And I get a brush across my shoulder, and I was like, "Oh crap! Like what in the world?" And then sound just came back on. It was just like weird. And so I looked at my cousin, and she looks back at me with her eyes are just big, and she was just like, "Did you just feel something?" And I was like, "Yeah." I did. But if these are ghosts, I feel like they're friendly ghosts, and they're glad that we're here. And so that has been my only experience outside of being at Brattonsville, historic Brattonsville, which that's down in York County, South Carolina. And we're walking on the outside of the quote unquote big house, and we're hearing this banging at in the bottom, like where the basement is. Mm-hmm. And one of the tour guides was like, "Yeah, that's common. Like we don't know what or who, but that's something that people hear often." So those are my only experiences. So you haven't had any of those type of encounters?
Yeah, I mean, as an adult, I spent a little bit of time visiting this town called Cassadaga,
Florida,
which is in Florida? Yep. Yeah, it's kind of in like central eastern Florida. If you're in Orlando, where Disney and all the stuff is, and you go just slightly northeast of that towards Daytona. You'll come across a town called Cassadaga, and what it is it's a spiritualist camp.
Oh.
So it's actually a really interesting town. It's not a ghost town, so it doesn't really, I guess, fit that bill of ghost town. But it's a town with ghosts in it.
Yeah.
According to the people that live there. And so what happens is this camp was founded by a man, and I can't remember his name. I wasn't prepared to talk about Cassadaga, but it was founded by a man who came to Florida to improve his health. Basically, he was told by his spiritual leader to come here or go there, and because of the humidity and the heat and everything like that, it was supposed to alleviate a lot of the issues that he was having. And he was told to find a town that was situated in a depression or establish a town that was situated in depression or something like that. And so he came across Cassadaga. He founded it, and over the years, it became this spiritualist camp. So today, everybody that lives there is a spiritualist or a medium or a psychic of some sort. From what I understand, the property is all owned by the camp itself. So you can't actually own property outright there, but you can own a building. So you can buy one of the houses. The houses are bought and sold, by usually somebody who's in the spiritualist community buys it. Someone who's in the spiritualist community sells it, and then somebody else that's in the spiritualist community buys it. So they are all, every house, from what I understand, has a seance room in it.
Oh, wow.
They do a lot of different spiritualist things, from, table tipping to ectoplasm readings or something. Like I said, it's not really my world, but I visited a few times because I was trying to do a photo story on it. And so I did a tour there. The guy that gave the tour swore that there were just countless ghost stories throughout the town. The museum on site, or the hotel that was on site, had burnt down at one point in time, and then they rebuilt it. And so allegedly there's ghosts in that hotel. The church itself that's on site has a medium, or has a spiritualist room, or a seance room in it as well. I did go to a church service there to see what it was like.
Oh, wow.
And
how old were you when you did that?
I must have been must have been college, so I'd say 18, 19 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there's a little pond out in the back, and I walked around the pond taking some photos out there
You
as
think
well.
they baptize people back there?
I don't think that baptism is necessarily a part of their.
It could be a different type of baptism.
Yeah, the interesting part is they respect all the different gods and religions and things like that. So maybe there's some sort of baptism that's happening there, but for the most part, it's about spiritualism itself. You know, just the act of believing in something, and something greater than we are. I think. Look, I don't want to speak for them because this is a long time ago that I visited this place. But so in photographing around that pond, I did capture some orb-like things. But like I said before, I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to spirits and ghosts. I think the statistics are there's been something like 100 billion humans to walk the planet, and there's like 8.5 billion now. So if you think about it, just statistically, that's a lot of ghosts.
That's a lot of ghosts.
That's a lot
They're
of ghosts.
everywhere.
So
yeah,
I mean, if there's 800 billion spirits just wandering this planet, we all would have had these ghost experiences. So I am a little bit of a skeptic, but I'm also open-minded to most things. So I could be convinced. It's just the evidence has to be there for me. And walking through Casadega, outside of the orbs, I didn't have any other very creepy experiences. I didn't feel anybody there with me or anything like that. But it was an interesting town. You should definitely check it out. It fits easily within the Hometown Chronicles USA sort of milieu. Yeah,
we should definitely do that. We need to put a traveling list together anyway for 2025. I don't know, man. I was always like, the dark has always done something to me. It's like, I guess when you have so much control during the day because you're actually able to see things and counter things because you see them potentially before they happen,
right.
Or even like hiking, right? Like I would love to hike the whole Appalachian Trail, right? Like I know somebody that I went to elementary school, middle school with, and high school with, and he cashed out his 401k and he hiked the whole Appalachian Trail. It took him like 3.5 months, right? But of course, you do it at night. And so it's just like, for me, because I'm such a visual person and I got to see, I got to feel, I got to touch, I got to be kind of have what my next move is, to be out there in the middle of the night, specifically in one of these towns that are designated as a ghost town or an abandoned town, man, I would freak out. My anxiety would be through the roof just because
I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
No way I'd want to hike at night, whether it's through just the Appalachian Trail or through a ghost town. I agree with you with that. I think it's got to do with some sort of control thing that we as like humans have with being able to see. Because even if I just get my glasses knocked off, I'm not having it. Yeah, it's major. It's anxiety city until I can find them again. I just can't stand not being able to see.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Speaking of the Appalachian Trail, there was one trail. I was talking to somebody, and there have been a lot of unfortunate murders that have transpired at this location. It's not Pixa. It's another one that's not too far from it though. So I don't know, man. That's some investigative work that we need.
Is that off of the Appalachian Trail?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. I wonder what draws people to go murder at that particular spot.
Just a-holes, man. Just a-holes. Yeah. That's all. That's all I can chum it up to be. So what other places have you been to or that you've done a little bit of research on? Like the place that you sent me last night.
Yeah, I sent you Centralia, Pennsylvania. Is what I sent you. So I went there, and I want to say 2016, about the time that I was moving up here. Centralia is really interesting because that's a ghost town where, like we were talking before, that's one that you probably wouldn't want to move to. Everybody moved out of that town. So Centralia was a major coal town.
Okay.
They had anthracite coal, which is like, the
Yeah, what
best
is that?
quality coal. Anthracite is like a really pure, high quality coal. It's
Okay.
valuable because of that. It's about, I guess it's like, I'm not a coal expert, but I think it's like the highest quality coal that you can mine.
Hmm.
And so Centralia had these anthracite coal deposits, so it was a really popular coal mining town. And I think at its peak, it probably had about 1,000 people living there. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a major city by any means, but it was definitely an established township in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in the 60s, there was a fire that started in these coal mines. And so the actual genesis or the start of the fire is, I guess, sort of disputed. Some people say that they were burning off like a landfill, like a garbage landfill, and
Okay.
that spread to the mines. Some other theories are that some coal ash was poured there, or coal cinders were dumped there, which is just
Mm-hmm.
standard procedure. But due to lack of funding for properly sealing the refuse pits,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have the proper fire sealing, and so it eventually spread. And there's even another theory that there was just a fire that had been burning in the area for 30 years, 3 decades,
Straight.
that had eventually spread to, yeah. Well, this is a theory. That theory
Okay.
particularly was disputed because there's a guy and his brother from the area that they had a bootleg mine, so they were just sort of doing their own thing
Mm.
without anybody's knowledge, and so they claim that if this was started by that earlier 30-year fire, that
Mm-hmm.
they would have suffocated and died in the mines already. So
Dang.
they said that they don't think that's it. It's more likely that the landfills were being burned off, or the coal cinders had spread and started this fire.
Okay.
But one way or the other, in, I want to say, like the 1960s, probably around 1962, I think is the date, this fire spread to the anthracite coal mines. And
Mm.
so once those mines catch on fire, they burn and burn and burn. And so
That was
they're
it.
still burning to this day.
Oh, really?
So yeah, they've been burning for a long time. And so what that does to a town on top of these coal mines is it causes like voids to form underneath the ground. So sinkholes were starting,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess this was discovered at one point because one of those sinkholes formed, and a kid fell into the sinkhole,
Oh,
and he
damn.
he he caught the story goes that he caught the tree root, and he was pulled out by a cousin or something, and so he survived it. But they tested the smoke that was coming out of it, and it was methane rich. So
Mm.
if you would be on top of that, breathing it in, it's toxic. It would kill you.
Most definitely.
Yeah, so they started discussing what they were going to do. The town had all of these different committees that started forming, and they all had different opinions over what should be done, whether they should
Mm-hmm.
abandon the town, whether they shouldn't abandon the town. In the meantime, this fire is just burning and getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And at a certain point, the state of Pennsylvania just basically came in and claimed eminent domain and took
Yeah.
all the property and kicked everybody out. They're like, you guys, you have to leave. You can't stay here anymore. It's too dangerous. And they kicked everybody out. There were a handful of residents that refused to leave, and so they were able to strike a deal with the state of Pennsylvania. Essentially, it said they could stay there till they died, but after they died, they had to give up their land to Pennsylvania, and they were just going to basically just close off the whole town. Nobody was allowed there.
I mean,
So
you're asking to die sooner with all of that, I'm sure,
I
right? Like,
mean,
if you want to accelerate and fast track your death and you want this, I guess go ahead and do it. Who needs Dr. Kevorkian when you're doing it yourself?
there's no amount of money that you could pay me to live in a ghost town like that with toxic fumes coming up from the ground. There's stories of cracks in the earth that would just billow smoke at certain times during the year, or just
Yeah.
consistently. Um, Today, as I said, that the fire is still burning. I don't think it's burning with the same intensity that it was back then, but it's still burning. The town's not entirely closed off. There's sections of it that are closed off. They demolished most of the buildings and the houses. There's a church still standing there that people attend.
Wow.
So people come from outside of the community into the community. People that used to live in Centralia will come there, and they'll attend this church. But again, like I said, with methane gas and all sorts of
Yeah.
the side effects from a giant coal mine burning, I don't think I would. And the sinkholes that are
Yeah.
opening up in the earth, I don't think you could pay me enough money to spend too much time there. But we did pass
No.
through it. and there was a landmark there, and I say was because during COVID they destroyed it, but there was a landmark there that was called the Graffiti Highway.
Okay.
And so it was a section of one of the highways that used to run through Centralia that they had condemned and closed off because it was over top of these coal mine fires. And so as the earth was settling and adjusting to parts of it just being burned off, I guess, the highway started to crack and become uneven, and potholes were forming in it. And so they had to condemn that whole highway, and it just became, they put a berm at the beginning and a berm at the end so nobody could get onto the highway. But locals and visitors would still come, and they would go on the highway. And at some point they started spray painting it. And when we visited, every square inch of the section that we walked was just completely covered in spray paint. And there were giant crevices in the middle of the highway. I mean, 2 feet deep, where the highway just started to separate. Yeah, and they were filled in.
Insurance companies were not going to cover your house or your car
No.
there for sure.
I don't think so, yeah. It wasn't like Land of the Lost or anything where I was afraid of falling in and going back in time. But there were definitely giant cracks and crevices there in the highway. And so we just went and read a lot of the graffiti. It ranged from pretty awful, terrible stuff to, some of it was philosophical, I guess you could say. But in 2020, during COVID, or 2021, sometime during or after the COVID pandemic, they decided it was time to close this up. They didn't want people out there anymore. And so they just brought a bunch of truckloads of dirt and just piled the dirt out on top of it. So it still exists today. It's just under dirt. You wouldn't be able to see it. And you definitely can't drive it or, ride four-wheelers or anything out there. So they closed it off to the public.
Yeah. It sounds like definitely a place I would not want to visit for sure.
Well, before the truckloads are out there, you'd want to visit. I didn't see any smoke coming up from the earth. I think if the fires are still burning down there, they've got to be pretty minimal at this point.
Yeah.
You're talking 1962, so that's what? That's like 60 some years ago.
Yeah.
So that's a long time for those fires.
It is. But you bring up another interesting point because I was looking at another town that's called Rodney, Mississippi, and so the state of Mississippi gained statehood in 1817, and this place was supposed to be the state capital of Mississippi. And so the Civil War, of course, happened, and then in 1869 they had a fire that was there in Rodney, Mississippi, right? And so there's all these things, connected to fires in these towns too, right? Just because, they didn't have fire departments like that, you know what I'm saying? And so if something caught fire, that's
their houses weren't sprinklered.
Yeah,
they have sprinkler systems.
Right. And so that was a misfortune. You had the fire in 1869 in this place called Rodney, Mississippi. And then there was all kind of other things from natural disasters, floodings, and things like that occurred as well, because it sits right there along the Mississippi, right? Mississippi River or what have you. And so people were getting out of Dodge because of the fact that, you just couldn't sustain living in a place like that. You know what I'm saying? And Mother Nature doesn't play, obviously. We know that. So there was these large sandbars formed along the river, and that just forced so much flooding. And so there's still today there's certain remains that are there, like a church. I believe it's like a post office as well. There's this themes with post office, right? Post offices were so important back then. When we went to, they were huge. It's like that was the job to have.
That was the original internet.
There you go. Absolutely. So there's still some structures that are left. But there was a 2011 flood as well that washed away the rest of the residents that were left. And so, but the interesting thing about this is back in 1930, the governor of Mississippi deemed it no longer an official town. So this is back in 1930 that it was deemed no longer an official town by the government.
They did that same thing to Centralia. They revoked the zip code. They just deleted it. It no longer exists.
Yeah. So I don't know. With that being said, are there certain services that aren't provided, like trash services. Like if you're not deemed a town, like city resources and things like that, how does that come about when you're not designated as such? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know how it works in a place like Centralia, for instance, where there's still 4 or 5 people living there. I mean, you're probably not going to send a lot of utility services out there for 4 to 5 people. I was wondering that when I was kind of reading back up on it again, the other day. I wonder if they do have like EMS or fire service out there, or if they're like, no, there's 5 people live here. You guys are kind of on your own. They got to be getting pretty old now with the deal that was made with Pennsylvania in particular, where they're, once those remaining residents passed, they had to give up their properties. So if we're talking the 60s, when there were landowners or homeowners out there, they've got to be fairly old at this point. Yeah, you do kind of wonder what happens. It seems like flooding is a common theme with these ghost towns. A flood comes through and destroys their rail system, or floods a certain section of the town, and then people just have to up and leave. And it makes me wonder what's going to happen to some of these towns out in western North Carolina that just got hit by Helene. Are we going to see modern day ghost towns pop up? A lot of them are talking now about how resilient they are, which they are. I mean, the amount of work that the communities are putting in to try and rebuild is incredible. And having come from Florida and lived through those hurricanes, I know that it does take a lot of work afterwards to rebuild. But when you also look at the amount of infrastructure and engineering that's going to have to be done to rebuild some of these highways, or even just the smaller road systems and highways in these cities, you do wonder, will they recover, or will we have new modern day ghost towns that are popping up in some of these communities? And obviously I'd love to see them recover, but it seems difficult, and flooding definitely seems like a common through line with a lot of the ghost towns that you sent me the other day. They all had that commonality in them, and especially in Utah, where their train line was destroyed by the flooding or something. So I mean, that's an interesting thing to think about as well.
I think because developers are so savvy now that they'll utilize that to their advantage. Like if you got someone with deep pockets and they look at this former ghost town and be like, okay, well, I can make some money off of this. It can be themed. We can put some tiny houses. We can do some tours. And especially if it's not too terribly far from a major metropolitan city, like maybe an hour and a half away or something like that, or an airport that's an hour and a half away, then, I mean, if you got deep pockets, you could really utilize these spaces, get them cheap, and turn a profit off of them. You know what I'm saying? Would that be the case in the 1960s, 70s, early 2000s? Maybe not. But in 2024, stranger things have happened with what people do with their money. You know what I'm saying? And so, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how. Well,
I mean, that's kind of what happened out in. Yeah, that's kind of what they're doing out in Cerro Gordo right now in California. Brent Underwood, I think, is the guy that's out there, and he bought that ghost town. Oh, I want to say like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, sometime during the right around the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I want to think.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that was an old silver, and I'm not sure what all they mined. I know silver was one of the things they mined out there, and that was a huge mine. I mean, a really big mine that's talked about a lot in a lot of historical writings. And that place had been completely abandoned. It was a ghost town. He bought it with some friends, some investors, and he started YouTubing everything that he did out there. And then he wrote that book called Ghost Town Living. And
the book that you gifted me, and I haven't been able to crack it open because we have been so busy.
yeah. And his story's crazy. I mean, he just moved out there and he started YouTubing all of his adventures. There was an old historic hotel there called the American Hotel, which unfortunately burnt down while he was living out there. He watched it burn down. He's in the process, probably nearing the end of it now, I would think, of rebuilding it. And all the time that he's living out there in those old Western buildings, he's learning and researching about the people that live there, and then finding artifacts that just totally validate the things that he's learning about them. And it's pretty cool. And so I think his final goal with that would be to redevelop it, like you were saying, into a tourist destination. Get the hotel back up and running, have people come out there. And if you just really want an old Western, mine themed vacation getaway, you go out to Cerro Gordo, you stay in the historic American Hotel, you go and you see the mine shafts and the different things there. You talk to Brent, who's lived there at that point probably for a decade, working on rebuilding it all, and he tells you all the stories that are there. To me, that sounds like a pretty cool vacation.
That's pretty dope. And that kind of leads me to this question, right? So this is the climactic question of today's podcast. Given the opportunity, would you own a legit ghost town? Meaning that people have come in, these experts have come in, they brought all their gadgets, these beep, 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 everything's bleeping and everything, and saying that they're, people that are there that are not there. Would you?
Oh, okay. You mean like ghost town with ghosts?
Oh, yeah. I mean like ghost town, like legit ghost town, like paranormal activity and all this stuff, right?
Yeah, I probably would. I mean, I pulled up that town. I found it. It's Mary Oaks in North Carolina, and it looks like it's currently $350,000.
That's a huge
which
drop.
Includes multiple buildings. Yeah,
Mary Oak. Okay, hold on. Go ahead. Mary Oak.
Okay, $350,000, which is probably less than the average home here where we live.
It is.
So to buy multiple acres with multiple historic buildings, and to obviously you have to have the bankroll to be able to refurbish them. Yeah, I don't think the beep beep beeps would scare me off of that one. I think
this is in Chatham County.
Yep.
It's not too far from Raleigh.
Right. $350,000. It includes a boarding room with 7 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, according to its real estate listing on Zillow. The general store is outfitted as an artist studio with a bathroom, and the train depot has a living space, bathroom, and kitchen. The buildings, which take up 2 parcels and close to 3.5 acres, were built around 1840, according to the Zillow listing. As a historic gem in the rough, the listing suggests Mary Oaks would be best viewed with an eye to restoration and renovation. Would I buy a town like that and restore it and do something with it? Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds cool.
But it says that Mary Oaks that part of it is now beneath Jordan Lake as well.
Well, yeah, maybe part of the larger town as a whole, but those 3.5 acres don't look like they're beneath the lake, and they've got they've got all the buildings standing there. It looks like. I mean, they're in bad shape. They definitely need.
Yeah,
they definitely need some work.
They need some love for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So you would do it, and how would Kyle envision Mary Oaks being?
Yeah, that's tough. There's one side of me which I think everybody probably relates to, especially nowadays, right? Which is just like, let's make it an Airbnb. We'll rent it out, and that's the best way to get a return on that investment. But for me, I would want to live in one of the buildings, put my studio in the other building, and I don't know what I'd do with the third building. I would want to live there. I don't know that.
Well, if you want to cut down on paying, if you want to cut down on paying a maintenance guy, living there would probably be ideal. And then if you were to have a guy, so this is my thing, right? I would purchase it, but I wouldn't live there. But I would get an old creepy looking guy to manage it, so it fits all of the horror movie aesthetics. You know what I'm saying? Like a guy with a patch and maybe a wooden leg that walks with a cane,
an eye patch.
Absolutely.
Pirate? Is that what you're looking for?
So yeah, we can have a pirate. We can have Blackbeard. We can have Edward Teach there. So yeah, I would do it like that just to add to the lore, but I wouldn't live there. I wouldn't live there.
Because of the ghosts, or just because of the old house and all the stuff that comes along with that?
I think it's the ghost thing, man.
The ghost.
I think it's the ghost thing.
You did say it was doing all the beep 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 stuff, so definitely.
Yeah, it's doing the beeps. Yeah, it's doing the beep 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 stuff. So, and then you'll have to make sure people know about the beep beep beeps and.
What if it's not beep beep beeping? What if it's totally clear? The ghost people say there's no spirits living there. Then what would you do with it?
I would build my own structure, and it would have about 70,000 floodlights around my house at all times, even in the daytime, right? On full blast. And it would be gated. And,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. No. I would live there if I was able to build my own brand new structure, and it would be wholly watered down, and it would be saged. It would be saged like
Wholly
crazy.
watered down.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would do it in that shape and form. Yeah.
All right. So the ghosts of the ghost towns are really the thing that scares you the most.
Yeah, that's what would do it. Yeah. I mean, because and now that I sit back and think about it, like. And now I'm thinking about more of the historic places that I have visited. I do now feel like there's been more things that have transpired in some of these places that like, and maybe it's just the noises from the old creaks, the windows and stuff like that, But at one point of time, I binge watched on so many horror movies that I was having nightmares and stuff like that. I'm serious. And like, man, Amityville horror, like those, and just a whole bunch of crazy stuff at one point in time, and it just kind of triggered me. And since then, dude, like I don't even watch horror movies anymore.
It changed you forever.
Did you
when you were in where'd you go in Florida? When you were in St. Augustine, did you do any ghost tours there?
No, didn't get a chance to do any ghost tours.
That was the only place I did a ghost tour. I think there's a prison there that you do a ghost tour in.
I've never been a fan of the ghost tours though, because it's just like who's BSing me and who's not, Like, and I've been to all the historic towns like New Orleans.
Right.
I've been to in the United States, New Orleans, Charleston, all these places that are deemed ghost towns or what have you. But not so much.
I didn't see any ghosts on my ghost tour, so for what it's worth, it
You
was a cool prison.
Yeah, you had a good actor or actress, whoever was giving you the tour. I think that may have to come along with their title.
Maybe they have to be able to sneak off into the corner and bang on a couple pipes.
Exactly, or have a cousin that's up in the tree making some noises or something like that. And it's at night, so you may not be able to see that cousin sitting at the top of the tree doing that thing. So
I mean, I do like the ghost tours where they take you through these historic sites at night. That is cool. I'm not expecting to see any ghosts personally, but. I do think it's pretty fun, and it was a cool tour. But I didn't see any ghosts there. St. Augustine is probably a good place for ghosts, though, if you believe in that.
And it's an old town. It's the oldest in the United States. So, that's the claim to fame with it. So, but good stuff, man. Well, now listeners know if we're scaredy cats or not. I'm one. You're not. So you would live in one of these towns, and salute to you for that, because I don't have the. Can I say the
fortitude?
That? There you go. To do that. I don't have the fortitude to do that.
Yeah.
But we got a lot of good, exciting stuff coming up on this podcast, man. Next up, we're going to be having some guests that'll be joining us here pretty soon. Ali Rivera is one, and that is going to be a story discussing James Vester Miller, who was a formerly enslaved man who built a lot of the buildings in Asheville, North Carolina, a lot of the iconic buildings, and some of the buildings that are still there today that survived, the natural disaster that occurred there not too long ago. And he also had his hand in the Biltmore house as well, which is, of course, one of the biggest homes in America. And so definitely looking forward to talking with her and some other really cool guests. Marty, she'll be on as well, Dr. Marty. And so,
from our YouTube channel.
Yeah, from our YouTube channel. So that was the Hoyle House episodes, which did really, really well. So that's an old home that may have ghosts in it. We don't know.
I didn't see
it. I didn't see it either. But we were there. We were there in the middle of the day too. So
we were there in broad daylight. So
it may change.
I guess it may change at nighttime.
Yeah.
So I mean, if this sounds like stuff that you guys are interested in, you can check out our YouTube. YouTube is Hometown Chronicles USA. We've also got a website up that has all of our stuff there. That is hometownchroniclesusa.com. So long as I can keep all of the new episodes posted for the podcast and the YouTube, you should be able to find links for everything there. But you can definitely find links to our channels. We're also Hometown Chronicles USA on Spotify, Apple iTunes podcast, whatever they're calling it these days, and all of the other podcast formats. And that's pretty much what we've got going on. Is there any closing words that you want to say, Murph?
Yeah, keep it spooky.
Keep it spooky. Stay spooky.
Stay spooky, y'all. Peace out.
All right. We'll talk to you next time.
Alrighty.
There's 20 million folks in this town.
Thanks for joining us again on Hometown Chronicles USA. If you love this episode, be sure to check out our YouTube channel and social media. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Show notes and all things Hometown Chronicles USA can be found at our website, www.hometownchroniclesusa.com.